It is 9 p.m. Central African Time. This is the Globe on SABC News. Thank you so much for joining us. There's the sole African country with a permanent seat at the G20. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he feels a responsibility to the entire continent to champion African causes and not just the national interest. He was speaking to the SABC at the summit in Argentina, where he has also called for an end to protectionism and urged his fellow leaders not to forget about the developing world. Our correspondent Kate Fisher reports from Buenos Aieres.
A busy final day for President Ramaphosa here in Argentina. Bilateral meetings with many world leaders taking place this morning. I managed to grab a quick chat with him in between his meetings with President Modi of India and President Moon of South Korea. I was able to ask him how successful he felt things had been at this summit, and he said very successful. He feels that South Africa's stature and respect amongst these countries is growing day by day. He says the voice they already have through BRICS is just amplified within this kind of arena. He reiterated how important he felt that we turn our backs on protectionism and isolationism and instead favour the multilateral way of doing business around the world. He said that the rules that the world has adhered to really since post-war times should be continued, and this increasing isolationism and protectionist tendencies from some countries, they need to stop, and organisations like the United Nations, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, they need to be listened to and obeyed to continue a successfully functioning world, if you like. He also said that he takes his responsibility as the President of South Africa, which is the only permanent African member of the G20. He takes the responsibility very seriously to represent not just his country, but the entire continent. As well, he says, not just the African continent, but any developing country, be that in the Caribbean or the Pacific. He says he wants to make sure the voices of all countries are heard and not just the biggest and wealthiest.
Well, Kate Fisher also spoke to President Ramaphosa a couple of hours ago.
Well, this G20 has been successful. It's an association of countries, 20 countries around the world that have a huge impact on the economy of the world. They represent up to 80% of the world's economy and represent a lot of people on earth. So what they decide, these G20 countries, of which South Africa is a member as well, is very important, as it has ramifications that go far beyond just the collection of the 20 countries that are here. So through this G20, we're able to set rules on how the world economy should function, rules on how the growth of the world economy should be regulated, the finances of the world. But this time around, more importantly, it was seeking to build consensus on important issues that have an impact on people around the world, particularly in relation to jobs. The future of work has been a very important topic that the G20 countries had to look at, because work has been changing, technological advancement has been changing the nature of work. So we've had to look at what portends for the future of work, how working people around the world are going to be impacted upon negatively or even positively by artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution. So it was important for the G20 countries to reflect on that. But in the course of that, they've also had to reflect on infrastructure, and infrastructure on how it can impact positively on the economies of the world. And for us as South Africa, that has been very relevant, because we've chosen infrastructure as an important area of economic growth. But at the same time, we've had to look at issues that could militate against economic growth. We've also had to discuss things like the multilateral system. We as South Africa are a firm believer in a multilateral system that is regulated along rules that everyone accepts, and that there should be no protectionism, and trade should be open. There are countries that are trying to destroy the multilateral system, and we're glad that as the BRICS countries, we've been able to fly the flag of a multilateral type of world order, rules-based world order, and we've articulated that message even here at the G20. So the G20 is an important forum in which 20 economies around the world get together with a number of others that are associated, the World Bank, the IMF, the International Labour Organization, the World Health Organization. So an agglomeration of all these organizations bring to bear new ideas, forward-looking ideas on how we regulate the economy of the world going forward.
As the only African leader as member, do you feel an extra pressure that you're representing the continent as well as South Africa?
Well, South Africa is privileged to be part of the G20, but our participation and our role in the G20 is not just only for us. We see South Africa acting as a member of the G20 on behalf of African countries, but also on behalf of developing economies around the world as well, in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, as well as Africa as a whole. So we carry with us the message of development, a message that the world should act in solidarity, should always take into account the interests of developing economies and smaller countries, even as we deal with issues of climate change and trying to mobilize various countries as part of the G20 to be aware and alive on climate change issues. We are always flying the African flag. So South Africa always seeks to fly the African flag, not only our flag as a country, because we believe that our interests, both economic, political, and social, are intricately linked with the interests of the African continent, which we are very much a part of. So we are proud to be a member of the G20, but we are also aware that we have a huge responsibility to take the continent along with us in everything we say and in everything that we do. You want to ask another question? Ask it. Forget these other guys.
Do you feel you've been listened to on those issues about multilateralism and also about helping the developed world more? Do you feel your colleagues here have heard you?
Well, our message on multilateralism is consistent. And what we are glad with is that our voice is very much vocal in the BRICS collection of countries. But beyond that, we believe that South Africa's voice is heeded. Our own level of stature and recognition and acceptance and respect grows by the day, and we are therefore listened to because we represent a voice that the world needs to hear. Because we, as a developing country and an economy, we speak on behalf of many others, not arrogantly, but in full consultation and in association.